Are you looking for inspiring conversations about faith, film, and life? You're in the right place. Here's the host who knows the right questions to ask, Father Edward Looney.
I've been mesmerized lately by the stories of several different holy men and women, young and old alike, who have causes for sainthood. And today we're going to be speaking to a relative of an individual with a cause for sainthood. We will be speaking with Joe McGivney, who is related to Blessed Michael McGivney, and we'll hear how Blessed Michael McGivney plays a role in his own life story. So I'm very excited for this conversation. I've read the biography of Blessed Michael McGivney, parish priest, many years ago. I don't have many recollections of his story, except I remember at the time when I read it being very moving and maybe a text that I should and would be worth revisiting. So today I'm speaking with Joe McGivney because he is the author of a new book called You're a Miracle, and it's published by Surrender Publishing. And the subtitle, I think, will be of interest to people. My story of alcoholism, miraculous healing, and God's infinite power and love. So we're going to hear how God powerfully acted in the life of Joe. We're also joined by his wife, who will also share as well. So thanks so much to the both of you, Joe and Nicole, for joining me today.
Thank you, Father Looney. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So maybe just first things first, your last name is McGivney. There's an American parish priest, Blessed Michael McGivney, could be Saint Michael McGivney one day, founder of the Knights of Columbus, which is in many parishes. How are you related to Blessed Michael?
My great-grandfather and Father Michael are believed to be second cousins. My grandfather was born in County Cavan, which is a very sparsely populated agricultural and rural part of Ireland. And he was born in a little village by the name of Kilnalek. Father Michael's dad was born in a little village called Drumkilly, which is 2 miles from Kilnalek. So they, the best we can tell from genealogy on the records that are available these days is that they were more than likely second cousins.
In your life then, growing up, did you have an awareness about Blessed Michael McGivney, or at that time, maybe just Father Michael, or maybe Servant of God, Venerable, whatever his title would have been? Did you have an awareness of him within your family ethos?
We did. It always, some of the older devout Catholics in our family were aware of, the fact that we were related. It became, my awareness happened after the book Parish Priest was published about Father McGivney's life. And I think I don't know if he was yet venerable at that point or not, I'm not certain. But I became aware of the link probably about 20 years ago or so, right after that book came out.
Sure. Was it one of those moments where you saw his name and you're like, oh, he's got the same last name as me, or people talked about him before that too?
Yeah, at the time that I learned of him, the truth is I was not practicing my faith.
Sure.
It really, other than, I used to joke that, when my judgment day comes, hopefully I can, say, hey, I've got a guy, Father Michael, I'm related.
Here we are, your wife is sitting next to you. Could you just share a little bit about maybe how the two of you met, fell in love, became husband and wife?
So Joe and I met back in 2008, and we actually had met at a Mexican restaurant. I was actually out one night with my girlfriend, seated there, at a high top in the bar area, and in walks Joe, sat down by himself. He was watching whatever was going on sports-wise on the TV, and he was eating. And my girlfriend nudged me and she said, oh, Nicole, check him out. So I looked over and, I thought he was attractive and everything rather. And we, carried on with dinner. I then went to the bathroom, and on my way walking back from the bathroom, Joe and I, locked eyes, and, we just looked at each other, and you could tell maybe there was an attraction there. So sat down, finished up dinner. It wasn't until we were in the car parking lot pulling out of the spot, then out walks Joe walking down our aisle, and my girlfriends encouraged me to, say something to him. I wasn't driving, I was in the back seat of the vehicle. And so the car stopped, and my girlfriend rolled the window down, and I called him over, and I said, hi, and he was very friendly. And of course it was an ego boost to him. So it was a car full of girls. And he said, what are you doing after this? And I said, we're going to the Yard House, which is our next stop. And, the Yard House is a lively place. It's a bar, it's a fun hangout. So we arrived and closed the deal with I would love to see you outside of here at some point. And so he got my number, and I was really excited that he got my number. And that was it. And then he followed through. He said he was going to give me a call within a couple days, and he did. This was on a Friday when we met. And then he ended up calling on Monday to set something up for the following weekend. And from that point forward, we were inseparable, and we just had so much fun together, a lot of things in common. And, we just enjoyed the same things in life. And it was really a beautiful relationship.
Well, that's great. So, you mentioned being at a Mexican restaurant, and so of course we know Mexican restaurants are lots of different alcoholic drinks, from Corona as a beer to some of the tequila drinks, whatever they might be, right? So margaritas. I know some Mexican restaurants have fishbowl margaritas. So obviously, a part of your story, Joe, is kind of overcoming alcoholism and the role that alcohol played in your life. So as the two of you began dating, then eventually got married, what was that role of alcohol in your dating life, married life, and when did you realize you had a problem?
That's a really good question. So, my alcoholism, began when I was a child. I started my love affair with drinking began the summer before I began in 8th grade. And it progressed. Like most alcoholics, the disease continues to progress over time. So I went from being a weekend warrior when I was in high school to then starting to drink every day in college. And then once I entered adulthood, I don't know if I can remember a day where I didn't at least have a drink. It's not to say that I was falling down drunk every day, because I wasn't. I was a very highly functioning alcoholic. I, had a very successful career in the financial industry. I, had actually been previously married and had 2 amazing young adult, at the time, young children from my first marriage, which probably was, my drinking would certainly played a role in that. But anyway, so with Nicole and I, during that honeymoon period, I guess you could say I was drinking like a gentleman, and there was nothing to excess. And then over a period of time, suddenly it started to reveal itself to her here and there. But in spite of that, we got married. We were very, very happy together. But as the years went by, my alcoholism again is progressing and progressing. And then I started becoming a blackout drinker on weekends. And I'll never forget always the shame that I would have waking up, in a alcohol-induced stupor, early in the morning, not remembering whether I had been good to Nicole that night or whether I had been bad to her that night. And let me clarify, by bad, there was no physical abuse or anything like that. I was just sometimes just very, short and obstinate and difficult. So anyway, so that continued for a while until it did. My blackout drinking really started taking place every single weekend. And Nicole, had continued, tried to, encourage me to stop, and, made it clear that she wasn't going to put up with this forever. And ultimately I chased her off, and we divorced. So after a period of time, we kind of came back together again. We started seeing a therapist, and I wasn't willing to accept that I had a drinking problem yet. So we reached a kind of a détente. We had an agreement that I would no longer get drunk. I would drink like a gentleman. No more blackouts, no more wondering the next morning what had happened the night before. And that worked until it didn't. And my fears and anxieties over what's going to happen to us, how long is COVID going to last? How are we going to pay the bills? I've got a kid in college, one on the way. And, most people, I think, in order to get through that period, turn to their friends, turn to their faith. I just turned to alcohol because I didn't want to feel anything. So during that COVID period, beginning in March of 2020, I literally had vodka flowing through my body and my brain 24/7. From the moment I woke up to the moment I either passed out or fell asleep, call it what you will, there was alcohol flowing through my brain the whole time. So as we moved through 2020, I started exhibiting some balance issues, some inexplicable, double vision and so on. I saw some doctors. I was having memory issues, and no one connected the dots to what was really happening. And then on December 30th of 2020, that was a very pivotal night in my life, in our life. We had gone out to dinner that night. We came home. Nicole had gone to bed, and I continued drinking down on the living room sofa. And my body completely gave out. I collapsed on the floor. Apparently I had, and by the way, I have no memory of any of this. The next phase of this, next 9 weeks, probably best to let Nicole share what happened, because I have complete amnesia of the entire period. So on December 30th that night, she managed to get me to the first hospital that I would spend some time at. Maybe it's a good time to turn it over to Nicole to explain what happened next.
Yeah, I just didn't know what was going on with him. I was just so frightened, and it made me a nervous wreck, to see him just deteriorating and essentially being so self-destructive, really. So, I took him to the emergency room that fateful night, and I initially thought maybe, he was having a stroke, or are they going to diagnose him with like some sort of brain mass or MS, or I didn't know what. So basically, they took him there in the emergency room, and that was it. I mean, it was COVID, and, I went home and wasn't able to, continue to go back to visit him in the hospital because of all the COVID protocols. So, they realized that he, wasn't walking right, and his just skills of like feeding himself and dressing himself. I mean, that all just kind of like, went away. He was very incapable. And so what was happening is, just the alcohol took over essentially in his system. He was having withdrawals from alcohol, being in the hospital, and they had gone through like the whole detox aspect to try to make him well, but he wasn't improving whatsoever. He had so much alcohol in his system that essentially his brain was rewiring, and he was suffering greatly with these bizarre like neurological effects and physical effects. And so he had gone to, institution, like he was in one hospital for the first 6 weeks. It was Jupiter Medical. And then from there, he had gone to rehab, and it was just like he was in and out of like hospitals and rehab facilities, and nothing was getting better in his situation. It was very touch and go. It was scary. I thought this is like the end of his life, so to speak, and this is what has happened as a result of consuming so much alcohol. I mean, he's literally like killing himself, or you know, it just I mean, it scared me so much. I mean, I was consulting with doctors often, and they had said, you know, this is probably how he's going to be the rest of his life, and this is going to be his baseline, essentially, with, you know, bedridden, non-functioning, you know, incapable of doing things on his own for himself, like needing assistance constantly, and the hallucinating. I mean, his mood swings. He was very combative and very aggressive. You know, he had to be tied essentially to his bed. He had arm restraints. He had a roll belt around his waist. He had ankle restraints. He had to have a babysitter when he was at these different facilities, like literally 24/7 to oversee, because he was a danger to himself and to others. So it was very horrific, and I mean, just so devastating. This beautiful guy with so much goodness and so many wonderful qualities. How could he possibly do this to himself? And not to mention not only him, but like how it impacted our marriage, the ripple effects. It affected his children, just everything, everything because of drinking, because of drinking. And I just never understood why he couldn't just stop, you know, and walk away and turn his desire to drink just off. I never understood that addictive, you know, personality, so to speak. You know, I don't have that, you know, in me as a part of, you know, my trait, as far as having an addictive personality. So it was just so heartbreaking for me to watch him go through this. It was such a dark period, such a sad and lonely time for me. I mean, I was devastated. And then trying to, you know, communicate effectively to family members and, you know, keep going at work. I'm a teacher, and so I was trying to run my classroom as best as I could, but I was a mess. And I lost all this weight. I'm petite as it is. I mean, I was down to 89 pounds. And anyhow, back to the situation there, he eventually, like I said, he had gone from institution to institution, finally ending up at the locked psych ward at this one last stop, his hospital there. And that's when I was told specifically by his physician overseeing the case that he has something called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. And basically that's like the most extreme, you know, state, like kind of near like end stage case as far as like alcohol, because of all alcohol related. And you can speak more to that and jump in. So
yeah. So what had happened? I had progressed to the very worst form of that syndrome called Korsakoff psychosis. And when you reach that diagnosis, the structures in your brain literally have changed. And of 100 people, 20 of them die. And Nicole most likely saved my life that very first night when I collapsed by getting me to the hospital. Otherwise, she probably would have found me dead on the floor the next day. So now I'm in this locked psych ward. They've confirmed that I have full-blown Korsakoff psychosis. So of 100, 20 of them die. I got through that, but that leaves 80 people with the diagnosis that will spend the rest of their lives that way. There is no cure. There is no coming back. So when Nicole was told, look, we're going to release him, we're a hospital, he can't stay here anymore. You've got to find a home for him. And Nicole, by the grace of God, found a place locally that agreed to basically give her 30 days to find my permanent home. They agreed to hold me. essentially. And I was discharged from the Lock Psych Ward directly into that treatment facility that was going to hold me. As far as we can tell from the medical records, because again, I have no memory of any of this, they probably put me to bed. And then the following morning, I woke up fully cognitive. I'm in a room. There's a dresser, there's a window, and there's a nightstand and a bed. And I'm like, where am I? But I was completely healed. I went from being full-blown psychotic to normal. Like that never happened.
Wow.
So long story short, I wake up in this institution and I wander into the hallway, and first person I saw, I was like, where am I? And he said, well, you're at the retreat. It's a treatment facility. And I said, why am I here? He said, well, you're here because of your drinking. And I said, oh, okay. Well, over the next few hours, and then during that day, came to learn they had to rush me to the hospital because my blood pressure had dropped. And it dropped to a dangerous point. So even though I'm now healed and normal and speaking, they rushed me to the hospital. The hospital calls Nicole and says, hey, you want to come see your husband? And I remember the call. I was sitting right there, and she, sure enough, she was shocked. She couldn't believe it. And I remember seeing her walk into the emergency room, and I'm in a gurney sitting up making jokes. She, literally like she had seen a ghost. And long story short, during that brief visit we had, she gave me kind of an overview of what had happened to me, but I couldn't even process it. None of it. I couldn't believe what she was saying. Long story short, they stabilized me. My blood pressure medication they gave me was, it turned out I was just dehydrated. They sent me back to the treatment facility. And about a week and a half later, we had a call scheduled with Nicole. Again, it's COVID. She can't come in and see me. So in that phone call, I could tell by her voice when she answered the phone that it was not going to go well. And she basically said, Joe, I'm so happy you're normal and you're healed again. You have no idea what you've been through and what we've been through. But when you get out of that treatment facility after your 30-day stay there, I will have left the house. I've already packed everything up. I've already talked to a lawyer. I just can't do this anymore. And the therapist tried to, interrupt the call. And he said, Nicole, let's hit the pause button. We'll schedule another call. And she interrupted him and said, there won't be another call. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. She hung up. Well, in that moment, I felt for the first time in my life what it truly meant to be broken. The woman I adored and loved more than anything in the world, because of my drinking, it finally, and I could hear in her voice, it was done. It was over. So I am literally sobbing. The therapist looks me in the eye and he says, Joe, there's an AA meeting beginning in 5 minutes and you have to go. Well, AA meetings were optional, we had been told. And I pushed back. And then I had a few words for them that I won't repeat, but he stayed persistent and he coerced me to go to my first ever meeting with Alcoholics Anonymous. So I walk in the cafeteria of this treatment facility. There's about 50 people sitting around cafeteria tables. And they started, like most AA meetings start, by reading the 12 steps. And step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. Like, I'm still crying, by the way. And I'm like, well, I think I qualify for that. Step two, came to believe that a power greater than us could restore us to sanity. Now I'm thinking again. And then step three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. I was late. The rest of the steps that they read, I didn't even hear them. My brain, my heart said, there's a solution here. I can make a decision to turn my life and will over to the care of God. And I briefly felt this moment of relief, and then I became a little terrified. It's like, wait a minute. Why is God going to want to help me? I had turned my back on him decades ago. Not because I was mad at church or mad at God. I was just so flawed and so selfish. I didn't see what was in it for me to participate in the church and live my faith. And then I very quickly learned by working through the 12 steps that God would take me home. That if I figured out how to surrender my life and my will to every day, not only would I be sober, but my life would transform, change. And it did. So soon after that, I finished my time, 30 days in that treatment facility. On the way out the door, the woman who was doing my discharge paperwork said, "Joe, what's your plan?" And I flippantly said, "Don't worry, I got this." She shook her head and she said, and this was a beautiful God moment. She said, "Joe, you don't got this. God may have healed you physically, but you're still an alcoholic. And I'm going to challenge you to promise yourself two things. One, with immediately after you get home, I want you to open your laptop and Google surrender prayer in all caps." She did that on her computer and showed me the screen and showed me this beautiful long prayer. I have a copy of it handy here. That is a Catholic prayer, as it turns out. She said, "Start praying every day. So these words on the page will start having meaning very soon." I said, "Okay, I'll do that." Number two, she said, when you get home within 24 hours, you find an AA meeting on the outside and you start looking for a sponsor. And I kept both of those promises. So I walked into my empty house. I found the surrender prayer. I got to an AA meeting, and my life just started.
Well, this is a testament to God at work. And, even in that first AA meeting, seeing how God is there, how even in just the reading of the steps, you begin to realize I can hand my life over to God. I'm curious, maybe two things. The first thing, when you woke up, I guess, from the psychosis that you were experiencing and you were walking the hall, you talked to the nurse, ask them, "Where am I?" First of all, they must have had to have been shocked because, you were completely different than you were the day before. And then, but secondly, I guess I'm curious, like in that moment, like what did you have a desire to consume an alcoholic beverage, or was there that desire for alcohol? Have you had that desire since you've kind of woken up from that state, or did the Lord completely remove that from you?
That's a really good question. The answer is he removed it all. First thing on my mind, by the way, was where do I get some food? I was hungry. But, when they discharged me actually from the treatment center, and now I had gone to a few AA meetings already, and, they wanted to prescribe me some anti-craving medication. I said no. I declined. That I have no desire and no craving whatsoever to drink. So God not only had, healed me physically, he had taken away, he had lifted that addiction, compulsion, the obsession, the desire. It all just gone away. And not only that, after I got out of there, I saw a number of different doctors. My liver, prior to going down for the count, my liver enzymes were at a point where the doctors are telling me, "Joe, you're causing irreversible damage to your liver." Irreversible, permanent damage. Well, they did blood work on me soon after I got out of there and pointed out to me that, "Joe, I've never seen anything like this. Your liver enzymes are perfectly normal. Your liver function is perfectly normal."
Wow. Now, the second question, kind of as a follow-up from everything you just shared too. So in that, Nicole calls you while you're in this treatment center, says, "I'm moving out." But here you are right now, Nicole, sitting right next to Joe. You're sharing this story. This is the second time. Uh, the first time there was a divorce, you came back. Then this time you're like, I just can't do it anymore. So what made you come back the third time?
Well, I realized, we both took time apart, and he was very respectful of me, you know, what had happened essentially he knew, and when I had left, I just was taking time for me and kind of reflecting on everything and sort of on a different path, and he was working on himself and kind of rebuilding himself as a new man. He was doing different things in the community, and he was attending church often and spending more time with his children. So it was just, he was developing more of a rich, fulfilling life, and I was just kind of carrying on and out there and dating. But it just, I got to a point where I was just like, oh my gosh, my heart still, I had a lot of alone time, and during that time, I would always think of Joe. I was just still consumed with thoughts of him and missing him terribly, even though, yes, we're divorced and I know what has happened. Oh my goodness, would it be such a huge risk to get back involved with him? But I was just still like in love with him. I really was. I was just so upset at first and devastated, and I felt so abandoned, pushed away. And I felt like he completely neglected the marriage because of what he did. So, I just was trying to process everything more and forgive and kind of, you know, move forward in a different light. And I realized he was working on himself. And I was having my own time and everything, but I got the courage one day to, call him and ask if I could come by the house. So our house. And you know, that was okay. So I went over, and that was a huge, like, heartfelt moment in time for me. And I thought, as I was on my way there, I can either make a complete fool of myself, or maybe this will be a good thing. I don't know, but I'm going to take a risk and let him know really how I've been feeling, what I've been feeling, and here goes. So, I was there that day, and I shared with him everything that was on my heart, and he was very receptive. But he did let me know that he started dating, and it was about 2 months into dating this one girl. So they had been consistently seeing each other. I didn't know the dynamic between the two, and if he truly cared for her and how things were. So as soon as I found out that information, I just felt like really even more upset, and I just so awkward being there. I was like, okay, I think I need to go now. But he did walk me outside, close to my car, and we stood there some distance between the two of us, but yet close enough. And it was a beautiful evening out. The sun, was setting, and there were people in the neighborhood walking around, and it was a little bit noisy. But like all of that just kind of went away, and we were just so focused on each other, and we just were gazing into each other's eyes for a few minutes. It was something out of like a romance movie, honestly, very romantic. And you could tell, even though no words were spoken at that moment, that there was a lot of still love left, and adoration and care for one another. So I left that day, drove away, hysterically crying, very dramatic. Then he ended up reaching out about a week later, and he wanted me to come by his new office. He had switched to a new financial firm, and was like, I'd love to have you bring the papers over, and maybe we can discuss your accounts, and I don't know, maybe you'd consider moving your money.
Very, very romantic.
I've always trusted him with money. He's a great financial advisor. So I took him up on it and showed up there at his new place. And it was, just immediate attraction once again. And after we wrapped up business, we had dinner together and had a really amazing conversation. And that was pretty much it. I moved in a couple weeks, moved back in a couple weeks later. And Then months down the road, in March 2012, 2022, right? Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. We got married again for the third time.
Now, just to also put a little cherry on that, I had, through the 12 steps, I had not only transformed, I'm now going to Mass every Sunday. I'm, embracing the church of my birth, and I am just thirsting for more and for more. And, when Nicole and I came back together again, she saw me going off to Mass, and she wanted to go with. And Nicole is, by the way, one of the most spiritual people I have ever met, but she had never been baptized, even though her parents were Catholic. For whatever reason, they chose not to baptize her or her sister. So long story short, she's now going to Mass, and it was kind of a Holy Spirit moment. It was, we were at St. Patrick's here in Palm Beach Gardens, and our pastor, Father Aiden, brought up during the, actual Mass, brought up a family that was going to be with a little child that was going to be baptized right after Mass. We brought the family up in front of the entire congregation, gave them a blessing, and Nicole, the tears just started streaming down her face, and she turned to me and said, I want to be baptized, and I want to be Catholic, and I want to be baptized right here. And from there, she enrolled in RCIA, completed the program. I actually went through it with her because I needed a refresher on my faith. And, grace of God, she was baptized and confirmed this past Easter Vigil. And we now stand, because our faith is so important to us, we did file finally for an annulment petition for my very first marriage, which is in, we believe, the final stages right now with the tribunal here in our diocese. And God willing, very soon we'll have our third marriage convalidated in the Catholic Church.
Well, it's a beautiful story of grace, of coming back to the Lord, coming back to one another, of how love conquers all things. And yeah, so thanks so much for sharing that. And I guess too, thinking about alcohol and kind of the role it's played in your life and your marriage and such. So are you an alcohol-free couple now? Obviously in
Yeah.
AA sobriety, like in your marriage, like do you join him in that complete sobriety?
I do. I've never been or I never was a drinker really. I'm just because of my size, and I actually have a kidney condition that really, if I am to drink, it can throw off my levels of potassium and magnesium. So, how like a lot of people drink to kick the anxiety. Like drinking for me kicks in the anxiety because of what it can do to me with my levels. So anyhow, yeah, I don't drink. And I haven't had a drink in a couple of years, actually. So we go out, and actually dinners out are a lot less expensive because there's no alcohol. So yeah, I mean, it works beautifully. And never do I think, oh my goodness, he's going to fall back and go back, resort back to drinking. It never crosses my mind. It never crosses my mind. I have so much faith in him, and he's completely transformed in such an amazing, amazing way that he's an incredible man.
Father, if you don't mind, you're probably pressed for time, but if it's okay, I'd like to bring it back to Father Michael.
Yeah, sure. So I was going to maybe ask a question, and maybe that's going to lead to it. But this is a miracle, right? So we talk about miracles as instantaneous, long-lasting, unexplainable. So it seems instantaneously you're cured of alcoholism. That it's unexplainable. Like they don't know. Most people don't come back. From 80% don't come back from what you experience. So So it seems like it would meet the conditions of a miracle. Do you know, like, why the miracle took place? Like, was there somebody praying through Blessed Michael's intercession, or was someone praying the rosary for you, or was it just God acting in a very powerful way?
Here's what we believe happened. So while I was going through my institutional odyssey, I have an aunt who's a McGivney. Um, she is the youngest of my father's siblings, and she and I have always had a certain connection. Um, anyway, Aunt Jerry is also a nurse. So when I was going from hospital to hospital, treatment to treatment, getting worse and worse and worse, Aunt Jerry was acting as my advocate, and she was speaking to all the doctors and then translating in English to hold to my family what was really going on. Jerry is also a very devout Catholic woman, and what happened is once I got out of the treatment center, Jerry and I started doing a weekly phone call every Saturday morning. Initially, she was just checking in, right? But to this day, 3 years later, she and I still speak every Saturday, and they're usually some pretty long conversations. But anyway, at that time, as part of my transformation and part of my sobriety and recovery, I wanted to serve others. And it finally dawned on me, well, wait a minute. Well, I'm now back going to church. Why don't I become a Knights of Columbus? It is my relative who founded the Knights. And then, so, before I went to my first Knights of Columbus meeting, I said, I better learn more about this guy. And I came to learn that he had recently been beatified and was on the path to sainthood, one miracle away. So anyway, so I joined the Knights on a Thursday night. That following 2 days later, it's Saturday morning, and I have my call with Aunt Jerry. And I say to her, Jerry, I think you'll be excited about this. I joined the Knights of Columbus. And instead of being excited, she starts crying. Like, oh my goodness, what I do now? She said, Joey, when you were sick, I was praying to God, I was praying to Jesus, I was praying to Mary, I was praying to anyone who was listening. But I fervently prayed, Father Michael, our relative. In that moment, everything came together, because once I got out and learned that I had indeed experienced a medical miracle with no explanation, I often wondered why. Why did God choose to reach down and save me? I certainly wasn't the only sinner. I wasn't the only one suffering from psychosis, dementia, alcoholism. Why did he choose me? And I think maybe we found our answer in learning that Jerry was praying fervently to Father Michael to intercede.
Yeah. Now, in the cause for canonization and that process, has your story been submitted as a potential miracle, or is it not as maybe a drastic of a miracle as they might be looking for?
Here's my understanding of the process, and I don't want to, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Father McGivney Guild or Knights of Columbus. Father McGivney was beatified October 31st of 2020, a little bit before, 2 months before I actually went down and started my physical or odyssey. Soon, as I understand it, almost immediately thereafter, they presented a case for a second miracle, one that occurred sometime before. And as I understand the process at the Vatican, is once he became beatified, that opened the door for a second submission, and they're only allowed to submit one at a time. So there is my understanding, there is a miracle at the Vatican today that we pray will be the one that the Vatican acknowledges, and Blessed Michael will become Saint Michael.
Yeah.
However, the Knights of Columbus has documented my miracle in a number of different venues. They did an article in Columbia Magazine, which is the monthly news magazine of the Knights. They've done a couple YouTube interviews and profiles. The Father McGivney Pilgrimage Center, which used to be known as the Father McGivney Museum, has done interviews with me. So again, my words, not theirs. In the event that the miracle that sits at the Vatican today doesn't become the miracle he needs, in addition to mine, there are others. Father McGivney has proven to be a very powerful intercessor. And that's part of why we wrote this book, was number one, to raise awareness for the cause. We all often think, what if one person asks Father McGivney to intercede now? What if they learn of his power and learn of his path to sainthood? What if the next miracle happens? And then the other reason we wrote this book really was through, sharing our story of God's infinite power and love, that people struggling with alcoholism and or addiction and their family members will find hope and maybe strength and courage to reach out and get help. And then lastly, we think it's just a beautiful story about how God, nothing is impossible for God. In this modern day world, I know many people think of, miracles in the Gospels, 2,000 years ago, but God's not done. And I'm a living example that he still has miracles. Give all of us.
Yeah, that's incredible. And this is all related in your book, You're a Miracle, which you are, Joe McGivney, a miracle, that's for sure, with your story. I think, too, it's a nice little title. It's a reminder to all of us that we are miracles, that God is working in our lives, and that's miraculous in and of itself, too. So it's kind of like a double meaning, I would think, there with the title. So your book, You're a Miracle, is available. You can get it on Amazon.com or wherever you buy books. And do you have a website or any place you refer people to learn more about you and your work, or Blessed Michael?
Yes, we do. If you go to joemcgivney.com, pretty simple, just Joe and McGivney, no dots, no dashes, just joemcgivney.com. You can learn more about our story. There's a link to buy the book, but there's also a place there for a link to the YouTube videos the Knights have created about my miracle. And then also, I love to tell this story. So if there's anyone who, is interested in having me and Nicole share our story at a parish event, at a conference, reach out to us and do what we can to make it happen.
That's wonderful. It's great to talk to a relative of Blessed Michael McGivney. Great to hear how he interceded for you and to really see the fruit of his prayers. The fact that you and your wife are sitting next to each other today, and that you've been completely cured really from alcoholism, which is a great feat. And God truly has accomplished this miracle for you. So thanks so much, Joe and Nicole, for joining me today.
Thank you,
so
Father.
much, Father.
Appreciate it. God bless you.
Take care.
If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. And don't forget to stay up to date with what Father Edward is doing by following him on Facebook, X, or Instagram at the handle @FrEdwardLooney. Thanks for listening, and please join Father Edward again next time for another inspiring conversation.